or additions or corrections?
I'll approve them as presented.
Jim Day has made the motion to approve as presented. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Adam DeFore has made the second. It is open for discussion. Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carried.
I'm going to send these around. I would ask that Jeff Satter, if you would, hold on to them, and that way they can be picked up by Travis down the creek.
I do want to, for people that have just come in, we will be conducting a public hearing at 7:30. If you want to speak on the ordinance, I have a paper. There's a pen up here. Need your name and your address on that, and we'll go by order of what they're signed in. So during the meeting that we have, you're more than welcome to come up and sign to be heard on that. I'd like to invite everybody, on behalf of the board, I would like to welcome everybody to the May 6th meeting of the Washington County Planning Commission. Everyone who appears before the Planning Commission is entitled to legal right of due process. Everyone who's present who wants to be given a chance to speak. We will ask that when you are called upon to speak, that you will state your name, address for the record. As we have old business for the Planning Commission, we've got not a very heavy slate of business before. And so is there any particular issues from the previous meeting or anything that anybody from the Planning Commission would like to bring up?
I think, it'd be nice, I think, if Danielle or somebody would go over the changes that's made at last meeting.
All right.
Okay. For anybody that's in the audience, sorry, I don't like that. Anybody in the audience, there are copies up here of the, I guess, the proposed draft that were changes went around after the last meeting that we had as a planning commission. So the major things that we talked about, I'm going to highlight those. If I've forgotten something, please
only, there'll be an outside forum on there, but I want the commission to know that we'll probably be asking the vice president to conduct the meeting.
This is the,
June the 3rd.
okay.
On that, as far as changing around the planning commission, it could be done, but it's not necessary in that, since we've, so I don't know how else we want to handle it. All right. So, if that we'll just go ahead and keep that, but I'll be looking for Adam to conduct that, this planning commission.
Yeah, those,
Yes. 7 o'clock.
the regular meeting.
All right. Okay. Is there anything else?
You said meeting, is it town hall or is it park?
Park? Yeah, park. All right, is there any other business? Then, because we're going to make a date change, we'll just work with that. And I'll correspond with you, Adam, if anything comes up. I want Travis to know. Okay. Anything else? We got 15 minutes for a public hearing.
We just need to let Tom get back.
All right. Any new business? Well, I asked for suspension of rules, on the plan commission meeting, we can do a break, 15 minutes, and reconvene at 7:30. Do I have a motion that way?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion, you help Tom out with his minutes on that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Well, Marshall made a second. It's open for discussion to suspend the plan commission meeting and reconvene after the public hearing. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, same. Motion carried. We are adjourned until 7:30, then we'll start public hearing. We'll be convening here in about a couple minutes. We're about ready to conduct the May 6th public hearing before us this evening. The same format will be followed on each hearing. Public hearing is held for the purpose of hearing testimony, and only that is not to be used as a forum for public debate between proponents or opponents. All comments must bear relevance to the subject at hand. A time limit of 5 minutes per speaker may be imposed. The only exception to that is if there is a group that has a common theme that they want to present and want to have a representative speaker to speak, we will allow their extra time for that. So take that in mind. And have a list. You want to go ahead and you got them. You want to go ahead and name them off and stuff. So anyway, with that. Whenever you do come obviously to present your name and your address, and we will be keeping time on it. At this time, I refer to Adam person.
Larry Lane. I wasn't here for last month's meeting, but I see you're doing a good job of getting rid of the crowd. Have 2 or 3 more public meetings, there won't be any general public here. It'll be these here corporate representatives that aren't residents, a lot of them, majority of them here of Washington County. I've lived at the same place. I've been for 48 years at 7938 South State Road 135. Same phone number, 40 years plus. I've been a taxpayer in Washington County since I was 18 years old. I've been in animal agriculture ever since I was 14 years old. I've had every piece of livestock there to be had, but a horse or a pony or a donkey. So I got experience a little all, even milking cows and raising chickens. So I'm here to tell you what you're fighting here tonight, or what you're trying to get through. In our way, it's been going on for 20 years out there, mainly between the neighbors of confinement hog farmers. And these men up here that know about that can acknowledge it if they're in the hog business and know anything about the news. I base what I stand for on do unto your neighbor as you would have them to do unto you. And the least thing we can do is to keep this thing at 750 feet for residents from a confinement building. The state says 400 feet, right? How long would that rule last in the great county of Marion, Indiana, where that come from? If they just put a few of these confinement buildings up there in Marion County. That law wouldn't last any longer than a snowball in the world. Let's get real, people. That's the reason we people that are for planning, we want the general census to be done for the general good of the public, not certain elements of the community or anything like that. Just as I told Kim here before I come in here, that I don't care how many of these confinement hog houses, chicken houses, turkey houses you build, the state of Indiana will tell you when you can't build anymore. I happened to hear this in January right out here at Cornerstone. There was a lady from the Indiana environmental thing. In DuBois County, Indiana, they cannot build any more confinement buildings. You know why? They got all the poop and manure they can handle out there on the ground. The government says no more. Park County, Indiana is within 2% of this limit. Park County, Indiana is where they have the Covered Bridge Festival every year. It's not noted as an agriculture county, but with the small amount of open ground they've got, the lady said they're within 2%, no more buildings confined. So I don't care how many buildings, just so you keep them 750 feet at least from your neighbor's house. In fact, I'd like to see a poultry dressing plant built in this county. And I believe we get one if we come up with enough water. We just don't have enough water. And it would be good for the county. But people, get real and do your neighbor a favor. Keep this at least 750 feet. Personally, I don't think this is far enough away. But 750 feet evidently is going to be hard enough to get through. And the lady that was here that you hired, she was pushing 400 feet because she was telling y'all you wouldn't be able to build enough of these buildings that you want built in the county if you didn't get it down to 400 foot from a residence. Isn't that right? That's what I heard. They had the map with all the circles on it, and they had the 400 feet and they had the 700 feet, and how that eliminated their space to build all of them. We've got enough land, open land in this county to build all the state will let you build. People, I'm not worried about that. In fact, I ain't going to be worried what you do here tonight because I'm not going to fight it any further. I'll be 75 years old in September, so I don't know if I'll make it to 75 or not. A few more trips to the doctor might not. Because the last time I went, I'm 10 times worse shape than I was when I went. So, do what's right for your neighbor, men and women, up here tonight. So I ask. And when I certain time comes on that clock tonight, I will be leaving. I'll sign my name to this petition here that we don't want it any less than 750 feet. And, you know, I'm very disappointed at Crowd of that. And I know how this stuff works. And I'll just put this little extra in. Maybe you haven't woke up to the fact that the people in the United States of America are the most lied to, propagandized, defrauded people in the world right now. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Larry. Kim Churchman?
Kim Churchman, 415 South Shorts Corner Road. Larry, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We asked you board members to look at this proposal in fairness to all the people, not just to keep Poultry Buildings from being brought into Washington County, because that is an economic growth. And the restraint from building is going to cause economic hardships that just shouldn't happen that way. I ask you to be fair, be good to all the people, not just some. Don't let government rule you as far as what you decide to do. Look at the fairness of all the people. If it's 400 feet or 750 feet, be sure that your heart tells you that's fair, and look at it that way. On to the actual document under the section 701.2.1 at the very end. The comment reads, CFOs, once constructed and having met all requirements of 701.2 are exempt from setback distances as defined in A and B above in relation to all future residential and public use development of surrounding properties. But it really doesn't apply to anybody that already has buildings prior to this ordinance. So there is still no protection for people who already have buildings. And I really, my last comment is, I really object that you are not addressing a reciprocal item in this ordinance to be fair to the farmer who is building on his property, whatever it is he's building. Thank you.
Bill Smith?
I don't hear real good, so I'm going to come up here a little closer. To begin with, I've asked several people how many actual chicken houses are in Washington County. How many actual buildings? I figured you guys would know if anybody would. Between the chicken and the turkeys, how many actual buildings are there up there?
We do not have that number because there's permitted building that we don't go out and count to how many buildings there are.
So you don't know how many buildings there are? So, Parks they built 5 more than they say they got.
Is this part of the ordinance that you're talking about?
Well, my real question is it potable water that they drink? Now, I hear anywhere from 1,800 to 2,000 gallons a day per building. And I use 36,000 gallons a year for myself. So when it comes down to a drought, who gets the water? The chickens or me? I get to drink the water or the chickens get it? And this is a lot of water they're drinking. Millions. 3 buildings, a little over. Well, their downtime, probably 2 million gallons. That sound right? 2 million gallons for a 3-building operation a year of water. Anybody?
What's the question?
I want to know how much.
The 18 to 20,000 gallons in a day.
Oh, it's 1,800 to 2,000
1,800 to 2,000
on a
gallons
full-grown full-grown birds.
Is on full-grown birds only.
Per building.
Per building, that's
Right.
still
So
a
we're
lot
not
of water.
talking
Sure,
the
it's a lot.
3 weeks out time we have,
Sure.
or the 50 gallon they drink the first day.
When they're tiny chicks.
You
I
know,
mean,
there's,
that's-
it's
a
not
sliding
that every
scale.
single day.
That's maximum, absolute maximum of the day when they're the biggest, right before the birds go out. Every other day is less than that.
Okay.
All the way down to.
Says 1 million
100 gallons.
gallons a year they use. Times how many buildings that you don't even know. You don't even know how many buildings you got. All that water gets chlorine in it. We have to pay for it. That extra use gonna use more pumps. I don't want my water bill to go up. I mean, and as far as you're worried about how many feet off the road you are, every ground's different. These farmers aren't gonna do you wrong where they build them. But I think they ought to have a lake or a well or something to help with it. I mean, they don't need chlorine, do they? Like the people do that drink it.
I would say the majority of the houses are on well water because they don't want to pay for it. My
I'm
bill,
talking about the,
my bill, if I use nothing but city water, would be $1,000 a month. And I don't
Can we
want
go
to pay
back
for that, so I
Can
have.
we go back to the ordinance, please, where this is what we do not want, okay? We want you to concentrate on your concerns and address to the planning commission and concern to the ordinance that's written here and bring your concerns if you have water. We don't want a public debate between audience and the person up here, or whatever position you are. This is a public hearing to hear comments on the ordinance, so please go back to the ordinance.
I'm sorry if I've offended anybody here.
I'm just
there on
staying with
public
the order of
meetings.
rules.
I've called several places, asked people to tell me how many buildings there are in Washington County, and nobody seems to know. And I thought this was a place to do it, but I guess it's not.
The county assessor should be is the main place you'll find out in the county, how many buildings are in Washington County.
Where at?
The county assessor. He's the one that's in charge of assessing all the buildings being put up so he's the one that tells you how many buildings are there.
I'm done.
All right. Oh, and it's statistical, the only thing you got is statistical. All right, got it.
Eric Albertson?
Eric Albertson, 5771 East Fairview Road. I'd like to discuss 701.2, your setback statements there. I have some concerns there with these, not necessarily with the numbers, but the protection seems to be a one-sided situation. It's all put towards agriculture. It was stated, somebody last month, that setbacks was also a protection for agriculture, and I'll agree to that to some extent. You have a 400-foot setback listed here from doorstep to doorstep, I'm going to say, from a house to your CAFO. But if there is not a resident on the other side of that line, it's only 200 feet setback from a property line. If an agriculture constructs a CAFO in that 200 feet, and later on the property owner next to him decided to construct a residence, then your 400 feet from doorstep to doorstep is gone. That infringed on agriculture's 400 feet. You know, either that's, we talked about the reciprocal's been talked about, or a flat setback. You know, there's the protection thing. You know, if we gotta be back 400 feet from a residence, and then you go in 200 feet, you're allowing them to encroach on that 400 feet that we would have to set in. And you know, it's been said that, and no disrespect to anybody, that we're dealing with the hot spot that's happening right now. And you are, and that's a hard thing to deal with. But this has been a 25-year situation that we started years ago with doing this plan, and it's took this long to get back again to this point. My concern is if you don't have the restrictions and protection for both sides, the people who are going to get the benefit of this, and no offense, Mr. Cypress, are going to be the attorneys, because there's going to be lawsuits going run wild, just kind of like we already have in the county now. Everybody willing to fight in court over, you're infringing on my space. So that's my concern to that, of the protection to both sides.
Lonnie Green.
I would like to see 15,000 square foot minimum on the buildings. These buildings are 400 by, or 40 by 500 feet, something like that, am I right? Now, the way it stands now, it's the number of birds that are in the house, that's how they're regulated. I know that if, Mr. Orr's comments last time was that, what if they want to put a tractor and, a goat in there? 500-foot long building, and, maybe we could do a little, business schooling. That would not be a good way to go ahead and utilize your property, to put a goat and a tractor and whatever. A 40 by 500-foot long building is made really for one purpose, and that's confined feeding. Now, the way the ordinance is written up right now, it allows these two building operations to go in and can build right on the property line. This is like, without the ability to monitor the actual size of the building, you're passing a non-ordinance. This is a non-law. This is one of the main reasons that this was brought about in the first place, because we had unregulated poultry. Okay? So it was put in during the committee and it was taken right back out. You really need to look at that. A non-law is inappropriate. We've gone through a lot of problems and trauma with this over the years. Okay? If you're going to write an ordinance that goes ahead and covers everybody. An ordinance is not just for the protection of the housing, it's for the protection of the farmer. If you have a long say like you went back to the 750 setback with a waiver from your neighbor. Even if you have reciprocal setbacks on that, that's not going to protect you from a lawsuit. Get a waiver from your neighbor. Talk to your neighbor. A reciprocal setback will just go ahead and increase the lawsuits. It's not going to protect you. Communicate with your neighbor. See what can be done viably. Don't try to trick them, slip things in. Okay? It's been horrifying. Please go ahead and make sure that there's a thing in there for the size of the building. And if they do want to just put a tractor, a goat, and whatever in it, then they can go ahead and get a waiver from this board. Okay? Please don't pass a non-law. Thank you.
Don Rogers.
Don Rogers, 1296 South Lochner Lane. I had mentioned this before back long ago, and now that I see some new faces up there, I figure it'd be appropriate time to bear witness to one of my, what happened to me back in 2010. I had a neighbor take the bedding of, or actually he bought some fertilizer from a turkey facility, and they trucked it in and put the manure and whatever else is in it and spread it up over about 20 acres. And never experienced this before, but because we live downwind from it and right directly next door from it, they really didn't have any concern. I don't even know if they even thought that anything was going to happen in a negative way. But we experienced a lot of the hydrogen sulfate that came off of that went over our property, but we couldn't hardly breathe, and that's the kind of the rotten egg smell that you smell as the hydrogen sulfate. I had to look it up to find out what exactly I was breathing. But we had to close our windows, 2 weeks later, the gnats started hatching from their eggs. And the gnats, you know, people see gnats sometimes and they come in little clouds and stuff, but this was consuming all over my house, especially at night because they'd run to my house because that's the warmest thing to go to at night is my house. They covered the house. I had pictures of it, video of it. I looked outside one day and I thought the woods were on fire because of what looked like ash was going past my window. And it was thousands and thousands, if not millions, of gnats. Most of them stayed outside because we kept the doors closed. But some got in. We set those yellow fly, tacky paper, and every week the yellow would turn black. At nighttime, as we found gnats in our mouth, our eyes, our nose, and our ears, we had to start putting cloth over our faces so we wouldn't wake up with gnats in our crevices. That lasted for a good 2 or 3 months. As the birds came down and started feeding on the gnats, it tended to go away. But, you know, there was deer that would cross over that area. 17, 18, 16, I would count them every single night. As soon as they laid down the manure, the particulates, the deer was smarter than the people. They would not, for 3 months, they didn't cross that piece of land. That's the kind of effects that I personally experienced, my family personally experienced. It wasn't very fun. That's why I've been here since 2010, because I don't want to experience that again. And especially if there's ever a facility built next to me, it's not going to last 2 or 3 months. It's going to last until they shut the place down, until their contract's up. I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Michael Gettelfinger?
Michael Gelfinger, 6342 West Rosebud Road. My only concern is a setback. Everybody's talking fairness. You all are telling me what I can and can't do with my ground, but not saying where somebody can or cannot build a house is not fairness. I mean, that would be like me giving you $500 and the rest of them nothing. That's not fair. But my concern is if it's 750 feet from a house, then that house should have to be 750 feet from my buildings. I mean, that's all I'm asking is fairness and a reciprocal. If I have to do that with my ground, everybody else should have to do it with theirs. And I mean, that's really my only concern.
We did try to write some protections into the ordinance for, that's what that future development clause is, an exemption for CFOs, is if you build your operation, you meet all the setback requirements. If somebody wants to build a house 200 feet away from you, they can't. You're right, they can do it. But it doesn't affect your future development.
But is that going to affect me if they did decide, are they going to be, if they took it to court, are they just going to throw it out immediately? I mean, would be my concern if I did go to expand it.
I can't speak for what a court would do, but this ordinance would prevent them from blocking your expansion.
Basically, if they're electing to build it within your setback, that's their problem, not your problem.
Get it in writing.
That's why we put it in the ordinance, to put it in writing.
I mean, I understand it is in writing, but I don't know how, how it would really protect me if I wanted to expand. I mean, yes, it would go through you guys, but if a good lawyer, I mean, you're a lawyer, could somebody keep me from doing it?
No, I don't think anyone would keep you from doing it, assuming there weren't issues associated with your operation that weren't limited to only the setback distance. I always say that anybody with $150 can file a lawsuit. It's just the way it is. How that lawsuit gets handled and disposed of depends a lot on what the facts are. So I don't want to sit here today and tell you that no matter what, based on that provision that Mr. Fryberg pointed out, that once you've met the requirements and if someone encroaches upon that space, your future expansion plans aren't limited. I want to be cautious and say that it won't be limited based on
according to 202, and it says, all matters within its jurisdiction and authority shall be in writing and be supported by specific findings of fact on each material element pertaining to the matter in consideration. I find it very interesting that you need to know the facts. If you don't know how many houses are in this community, that's a fact. I think it's important that you, as the board, know how many houses we have here. My understanding is that you had a map, 750 feet was the setback, and you drew circles around residencies. Is that correct? Am I correct in that so far?
We took, we identified certain operations, you know, that were on confined feeding operations.
Right.
Because that was a posted material. And we had the aerial view, and we just picked out, you know, at different, you know, places of density in there. We drew in circles around them to try to see what circles of 400, 750, different distances, 39, and, you know, just kind of get a view of that, so we did do that.
Okay,
We didn't go in there and count every building on those areas.
Okay, so then my question would be, when you went from a 750-foot setback to a 400-foot setback, then how many more houses were able to be placed or put in to our county when you did that? Did you make note of that? Did you pay attention to that? Was that a fact that you were interested in finding, or no?
Well, I was on the committee earlier, you know, and we did this whenever we were looking at the point system and looking at densities, you know, of population, which that language was scrapped, you know, and put for something else. But we did look at, you know, the impacts of what certain distances did. Of course, when that package had been put together, and we actually, as the densities got up, the distance got larger, so that really the intentions of that was to mitigate or migrate the CFOs away from populated areas because the distance was getting greater.
Okay.
And stuff. And so we did look at those different maps and stuff.
Okay, that's something that I wasn't here or privy to, so I didn't see it, and
If I may, I think one of the things, no, did we count them, and count parcels that would be eligible under 400 versus 750? No, I don't know that anyone sat around and counted parcels. But what we were able to see in the meeting, I wasn't on the committee, but in the meeting was when we went from a 400 to a 750, what she did was took every residence or every 911 address that supposedly have a residence. It's not 100% accurate. It's the
Sure.
system they had.
sure.
They drew a red circle with a 400-foot radius around each residence. Then expanded it to 750. And correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but what you could see was white space just disappearing in whole clusters of red space where, you know, any development from a CFO standpoint would just be excluded. Is that a fair summary?
And that was my understanding as well. Also, my understanding is that this lady who did this for you also is a proponent, or I'm looking for the word.
Let me comment though, that it's a little bit misplaced to beat up on the consultant because that responsibility lies with this board.
Okay, and
We made the decision to make the changes away from the point system and use the 400-foot setback for a variety of reasons. It wasn't her input that influenced.
Sure, and I'm sure there were other points. I guess what I'm saying to you is, if you go from a 750 and you go to a 400, how many more houses can be put in? And the reason why I say that to you is, last month when I was here, I said about 12. Well, actually, around my house, there's 21. Just around my house. And that's within, you have to go 1.5 miles around my house. But that's a lot of houses. That's a lot of stink. But let me mind you, I want to tell you this, I have been able to do some finding of my own, and those gentlemen who own the houses around my home are very proactive in making sure that there's not a lot of stench. they have things set up and put in place so that the odor is as minimal, I suppose, as it can be. Does it still keep me from going outside on days? Yes. Have I also found out that some of these gentlemen, and which is so wonderfully kind for me, for them to even think about their neighbors, because there are a lot of people who don't consider their neighbors. But these gentlemen have, and in fact have chosen not to spread where I'm living, because they know that I've had lung surgery and I've had histo, and so they want to try to help their neighbor, which is great. But let me go back to this because I'm kind of getting away from what I was aiming at. 750-foot setback was big. It allowed no expansion, no more CAFOs to come in. I'm wondering how many more 400 feet, how many more is going to be able to put in? Because again, my biggest concern is keeping our county the way it is. Beautiful, wonderful, great place to raise your kids, and not just a smelly CAFO place. You know, I know we all live in this community and that's what we all want. The turkey houses that are away from my home are more than 750 feet. 3 days after our meeting last month, my husband goes outside for tens of thousands of flies all over my house. Never happened before. Tens of thousands. I have pictures on the phone. I meant to have them emailed and, print them off so you could see them. But ultimately, tens of thousands of flies for 2 days on my house. It was disgusting. Disgusting. I didn't want my kids playing outside. It's just more of what we have to be careful of. More of what we need to be aware of when we're setting these ordinances. Is 400 feet reasonable? Are there going to be more than our county, our community can handle? Because, Tyson's or any other people who want these CAFOs in here, they may or may not live in this county. If they don't live in this county, what do they care how many we have? What do they care what happens to our community 30 years from now? Well, 30 years from now, I plan on being here. 30 years from now, I want my daughter to be here. And I care. And the residents who are sitting in this room care. So I don't know how many more, but it may be something you want to look at. It may be something that you want to see. Well, how many more can we put in? How many more are we willing to accept into our community? Because we don't want the face of this community to change. We do want to develop it, not saying that we don't. But another point the gentleman brought up about water. It is, let's say on average it's 4,000 in a 45-day period. How many ever gallons of water they use. Before,
30 seconds.
5 years ago, no water was going to the turkey houses out here in my community or in my neighborhood. We had a water shortage. And I feel like I have a very valid question when I say, who's going to get the water? The birds or my family? The other thing is, they get a big discount on their water. Well, that's for the water board. But my point is, what if there's no water? The ordinance doesn't plan for this. So the more houses we have, the less water our families have to use too, especially when we're talking about a shortage situation. And for the last 4 or 5 years, that's something that has been talked about readily in our community. I just think you guys really, there's some places where we've got some holes and I think we need to fill it in. Thank you.
Max Green. Who? Max Green.
Max Green, 10130 West Cedar Lane, Campbellsburg. The reciprocal's been brought back up. And part of the reciprocal, are you willing to give up the right to build your house in front of your poultry operation has to come into question? Like, for instance, a lot of people do try to build their operation where their homestead is. But if you actually bring in this reciprocal and say nobody, is it going to be for nobody, or are you going to keep an exemption for yourself? If nobody can be within 400 foot of that facility, what happens when your house burns? Or you have a regular disaster come up and your house is non-compliant? At that point, you're less than 400 foot. You comes into the fairness, equal, and equal protection under the law for everybody, you know, are you really entitled to an exemption? If you're gonna impose the 400-foot reciprocal and say, this is a dead zone, nobody lives within this dead zone. And you look at what the zoning is really intended for. The intention of the zoning is the eventual elimination of non-compliant uses. And you know, we went out of our way with this ordinance here to make sure that if a poultry house is collapsed by snow or whatever, it can be rebuilt back, even if it is too close to an existing structure right now. And I hope as we go forward, we'll give that same opportunities to the homes for everybody in the county, and not when you get the event of a tornado, your house is non-compliant, you can't build back. I would like to see as we go forward that we make sure that everybody can build back on their own footprint, their own home, or a mobile home, and actually be grandfathered in the way the people actually believe grandfather really applies. But if you look at what the zoning book actually says, it says the intent is the elimination of non-conforming uses, or non-compliant uses. Thank you.
Mike Yeager?
Yeah, Mike Yeager, and I have some ground on Wakanar and Conway Church. I don't have their tillable ground, I don't have the actual address, if that matters. But I'm also a contractor for 30 years and build homes, and we don't plan to build any houses on that property or anything, but changing the 750 to 400, I don't think anybody would want a chicken house or a turkey house within 400 foot of their house. So if somebody has enough ground to have that, they should be able to stay, you know, the 750 and not make it 400. I can't imagine, I mean, like I said, we don't live right around here, I live in Clark County, but then I wouldn't want a chicken house that close. It seemed like 750 foot, and I'm out in that area in Conway Church Road, if you drive out through, there's the farms that are pretty large, and there's lots of open ground for a chicken house. If somebody doesn't have, you know, they just got 10 acres, maybe they shouldn't have a turkey farm or whatever, you know, but I think that 750 should remain for I can't imagine anybody in the room here would really like one that close to their house. I mean, if you have a nice house and somebody's going to build one that close to it, it would definitely damage the property value and be a nice place to live.
Steve Yeager?
Yes, I'm a brother of Mike here. I live in Georgetown actually, but I have some property on Lockenauer Road, which is next door to Don Rogers and his family. And I'm here just to kind of support him and all the people who live in Washington County. I remember looking at some property several years ago in a different county, and a friend of mine and I were interested in this wooded land. We pulled up and there was a chicken house operation, a turkey house, right next door. And we got out and we smelled the smell, and we looked at the property and we left. And so the property values are going to go down. And so I'm thinking about people who have nice homes and families. I think Don's daughter's here tonight. You know, Washington County is a beautiful county. It's my favorite county, just to drive through, go out to the property where I have and hunt and so forth. And I thought about building on that 20 acres that I have there, very seriously. But you know, if you allow the 750 to go down to 400, that's going to increase the smell. It's going to decrease the property value of so many people who live in this county and love this county and have nice homes, and they won't be able to sell their house. And they'll be just like I and my friend come up, and we got out and we smelled the smell. We got back in, and we're not going to buy this property. So think of the people who have nice homes and have families and love their county. And so if you're considering on lessening that distance down to 400, think of what it's going to do to their property value. Think of what it might do to people who want to move out in the county and in the countryside, like a lot of us people do, who want to move out of the city and get a little space. What that would do to decrease, you know, future home builders and future homeowners who want to raise their families in Washington County. So I just ask that you would consider that before changing the 750 down to 400. Thank you.
That's all we have. Has anybody not been able to sign, would like to speak at this time? If not, is it speak
discuss issues raised in the hearing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things, if I can get my thoughts straight. Right now, do you know what the setback requirement is if someone wants to build a turkey house next door to you?
0. For 30,000 or less. Yes,
Zero.
we're quite aware.
They can build it right next door.
Sure.
So the purpose of this ordinance is not necessarily to reduce the setback requirement from 750 to 400 feet. The main reason we were doing it is to get uniform setback for all CAFOs, including the ones that are not regulated by the state. And that point seems to get missed a whole lot. All people talk about is the fact that, the setback is going to go down. Well, the big problem is someone building one 10 feet away from the house because there's no setback requirements on anything under 30,000 votes. So that was, a lot of why this whole thing was a concern. So that was one thing I wanted to make sure that everybody understood. And the other thing was that the state does not have any reciprocal setback requirements on what the CAFOs that they regulate at all. I mean, a person can build their house wherever they want to around a chicken house because residences are generally not considered undesirable to chickens or people who farm chickens. But chicken houses, obviously, or turkey houses, or any kind of confined feeding operation can be around residences. So, it was just kind of us taking the reciprocal language out of there. That was the reason for it. I mean, it's any reciprocal language in their setback rules. So, if somebody wants to build their house that close to the CAFO after it's already there, we figured just let them do it. It's no skin off the farmer's nose. So, that was kind of the reason there. We weren't trying to be unfair to farmers or anything like that. It was just, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of my comments here, that was about it, so.
I want to make a comment. It's been a laboring process, as far as the drafts and the way they come about. And, there was a lot of ideas that talked about water supply. That was in some of the original draft language. There was population densities and setbacks that as population densities, increased in there, that the setback requirement increased. That's been taken out. There was a lot of ideas that was brought up, when different comments that was brought up before this plan commission that was drafted out. But ultimately, it come back that there became quite a bit of conflict of direction. And we were stalemated at a particular point, around August to September last year, that we didn't have any movement. And so there had to be a compromise made, and there was some changes in that particular group, Unfortunately, we lost representation of the confined feeding operations, and I mean, in that group. And I think that maybe people may be amazed that the 400 feet setback come back into play when the confined feeding operation people were taken off of that committee. That some of those larger setbacks with population density were more intact whenever the confined feeding operators were in representation of that. And my whole concern was in this, was trying to get fairness, in it, and my inclusion was to try to proper setback, for all parties. But if we went through that exercise to get a proper setback, and we went through the energy and resources to get those proper setbacks, then let's try to keep those setbacks. Not only for the residents, but also for the producers. And that's the reason reciprocal language was introduced in that process. But right now, we've got a document that's been gone through, and it's been compromised through committee, it's been discussed, and we've come to a common ground with this, with some of that language. A lot of these concerns I hear in front of there have been discussed, very immensely. And, but there are certain things that people didn't like about it, and this is a compromise. Because this is more closely identifies IDM language, which everybody have more comfort level of following state guidelines.
That's where the 400 feet came from.
Yes.
It wasn't from Kerry's counterfeit.
It wasn't from Tyson.
It was because IDM's regulations are 400 feet.
But they only apply to 30,000 and up.
Yeah.
So what we did
But
was,
we adopted that setback for our county based off of IDM's 400 feet. And I think also too, that we made mention in that meeting with the reciprocal setbacks, since we didn't have really a housing ordinance, that we really didn't have the agricultural land use was not the place to put that, if I remember that correctly.
That's correct. It wasn't enforceable because of that.
Yes.
So, anyway,
I'll reiterate what Adam said. I think a point that's frequently missed for a variety of reasons by the public is a great number of the confined feeding operations in the county today are below 30,000 birds and completely unregulated. So anything that we pass here is greater protection for residential property than what you have now.
Can I say something? I'm sorry, but just in response to that, I've heard this said again and
your
again.
name, please.
My name is Colleen Devlin, 1956 South Conway Church Road, Franklin Township. This has been raised a few times, and it was suggested in the last meeting that the lawyer who was here was representing us and we didn't understand what was going on. He suggested that. We do. He was here at the very last minute. He had very little briefing. He was here on behalf of his partner, and he erroneously mentioned a permit. We are totally aware that most of these operations, that a lot of them coming in are under the numbers. This is our concern. This is why we are here. This is what's happening next door to us. We didn't hire a lawyer and not understand what the issues are. We understand perfectly. Everybody in this room does. That's all that. I'm tired of being misrepresented myself. I'm kind of angry.
well, to address that, I don't think he was upset because he was, and I think both of you were present, and he was arguing that if this plan commission approves this petition before it, et cetera, that preface to his comments came up a lot, and we just corrected him. I don't know, so I think he was under this impression of what was going on. So I just,
Anything else in comments? Not? Anybody? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn from the public hearing and reconvene for the plan commission. Scott Mullins made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jeff Souter has seconded. It's open for discussion. Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Motion carried. At this time, we will reconvene. The plan commission meeting.
Mr. President,
Yes.
who made the motion first?
Marvel.
Thank you.
Jeff Souter, second. want to proceed as a planning commission at this point? Do you want to have more discussion on some particular items? I've got one item that I do, that Max had brought up in there, and I'll try to go back through there, but, you know, in all these draft ordinances, my gosh, I've got a pile of them right here. I don't know where the exclusion for that homestead of the owner's home. It was not supposed to be part of that measurement of residence.
That was confusing to me because that was one of the things that we said was very important was for the combined feeding owner to live his home or her home to be close to the combined feeding operation. So I'm confused as to why we would talk about that.
Okay. You know, because some of the original language in some of the drafts, that was a pinpoint as far as a conflict. I'm like Max, I don't see that in there. And I think that is a mission. Because I don't think that distance was a correspond with the owner's house for that property. Am I correct in saying that? I know of several operations. I know of operations where we have purposely bought a house to stay within that distance by owning the house. I don't think.
Depends what existing off-site residence. On page 9, 701.2.1, must be located within minimum 400 feet from the existing off-site residence.
Off-site. So we're not saying, is off-site a description of other ownership?
Right, that's where it is.
Existing on-site residences are excluded from that sentence.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question?
Go on.
When you made your comment, were you saying that an on-site residence should be at least 400 feet from the confined feeding operation also, or that they're exempt from that 400 feet?
If you wanted to do the reciprocal, it's only fair that they not get any exemption either.
The on-site should not.
The on-site should not get one either. But the reciprocal's not in there. I have no problem with them being that distance, but not in a backdoor manner where they have rights that I don't have. But we don't have the 400-foot reciprocal in, so I have no problem with the on-site location as it's stated right here. But if you're gonna, as we go further down the road, if you decide that this 400-foot has to be the dead zone, which, when we did this in subcommittee with Kerry Keller Steel, we ran the numbers, and like to buy 7 acres, you control over 20 acres. You would have that big of impact on the neighboring ground, and that was part of why we decided not to pursue the reciprocal. Is the small percentage of acres you'd have to buy yourself to be able to control that much. But I'm fine with the language that's in there now, so long as it's not got the reciprocal tied to it. But that was the problem, where you decided that you can still build your house in the same, within the distance that I can't build mine.
So you think that the off-site language is the correct language, Max?
For what's in here right now, yeah, I think right now you should be able to build it.
That's the way I interpret it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's my only point, because, I didn't think we had that intention either way. Okay.
Is there any discussion on the building size requirement? I mean, I think the point is to address manure.
get is a certain amount of conformity, you know, even for smaller operations. They were calculated, you know, erroneously in a different degree with IDMR, which we actually tried to go back to a formula, you know, with manure load, is that actually the IDM regulates manure storage. Okay? And the reason that they come up with manure storage in there, and they calculate by animal density, you know, is how they regulate. And I think you can steer, just go to operation, you could go into something like a riding ring, and that just may have a horse or two in it, that's a large ring, so you're actually putting them underneath of a confined feeding. If you put them at 15,000 square feet, and I don't think that's the intention of, you know, this plan commission to do something like that. If you have a structure that has animals stored in it, but of waste isn't, you know, such a riding ring. And I don't think we want to start jurisdicting riding rings, do we?
But is there something that would catch that the ordinance doesn't catch? Is there, can I direct my comments to Rhonda? What would the building size catch that the number of heads of animals not catch?
There are two building operations that now that we have a hub here from, was it Farbest? They only have to have two buildings, okay, from what I understand. And so there is no regulation. The birds are smaller, I mean, there's a smaller number. Even in one of the council meetings, where the assessor's assistant said, you know, what people have been telling him is that they'll build under the regulations. You know, how many horse rings are built in Washington County? I mean, couldn't they just go ahead and come in and get a waiver? Say, this is a horse barn. This is something where we're going to have riding lessons. Okay. I mean, isn't that easy?
Well, but that issue, I think, we could address that by just lowering the numbers that it applies to.
Right. But, you know, apply it to the building size. What a lot of the neighbors have is that it's not just a little house going in next door to them. It's a 500-foot long building. You know?
500-foot long building is 20,000 square feet.
You know, that's a huge structure. It doesn't matter if you grow fairies in there. That's a 500-foot long building next to your house. That's an awesome structure. You know, it's not a little thing. You know, and that's where part of the fear comes in. You know.
But your primary concern, though, I take it, is that you're hearing that producers are already threatening to build under the new threshold?
Yes.
And that's what's driving your concern about regulating the building size.
Right. Because this will be, it's not effective. You go ahead and pass it as it is, it won't regulate. You know, it won't catch everybody. And the thing of it is, it's not a way to, you know, don't think of it as a punishment. Think of it as being recognized for what you are and being able to go ahead and put a business where it won't affect people, where it won't abuse people, where you can go ahead and do business in private and do business well without the irritation of the public. You know?
What you're saying is that you think that that everything should be regulated by square footage. We don't have a large dairy operation in this county right now that would fall under these regulations that I'm aware of. But for the difference in the size of the animals, you're going to have a larger structure for a 1,000-cow dairy operation than what you're going to have for 30,000 chickens. By putting a square footage regulation in there, you're hindering any large dairy operations, and there's other large livestock operations that could be hindered.
Well,
you're talking about a large building. There's a building on 160 nearly along the Clark County line now that's a horse arena other horse stalls in there. I'd say that building is probably, I have never looked it up on the assessment card, but I would say it's around 1,000 feet long and probably 100 feet wide. So there you've got a building that's 100,000 square feet. And, you know, I don't know that we want to limit something like that from coming into to this area.
Well, it's not to limit it, it's to recognize what it is. Aren't we supposed to regulate? You know, if you build a turkey house, because, you know, say it's within the law, you build a turkey house on your property line next to your neighbor, you know, that's going to piss them off.
But everything is not going to be turkey houses or
Right.
chicken houses under these rulings. And so what I'm saying is that I don't think that square footage can enter into this. I think you have to do it on a per head basis or whatever.
But yeah, you can always get a waiver. That's the whole point of it. Even with a long or 750-foot setback, you can always get a waiver from your neighbor. If you're building next to your brother or sister or whatever, get a waiver. Have it on the property deed so that they can't sue. If they sell the property, they can't sue the business that's already there. Do some, instead of trying to put through reciprocal and trying to slip these businesses in, with, you know, these two building businesses and all this kind of stuff, try not to think of it as that. Just try to think of it as trying to avoid being sued constantly. You know, the reciprocal's not going to save you from being sued.
So, let me ask another question on that. If
Right.
they put two buildings in that are smaller, so that they're under the head count per building, then the buildings are under the size limit too.
There are times when I think we should be regulated. We have a bunch of chickens. We might need to be regulated. I don't know. We could go ahead down to that size or what have you. But the thing of it is, two 500-foot long buildings come under the line of that bird level. Try to go ahead and bring it down and say, look, you know, try it out for a while. Regulate everybody. Or recognize everybody. This is the whole reason this came about anyway in the first place. Because people were coming in under the line. And I hear a lot of, well, let's just accept it. Let's just, you know, it's better than what we had. Well, we could have had an ordinance 2 years ago to deal with this. You know, I've sat through all of this. I know I was there when the flaming chicken incident happened. Tom and I are the only ones. And the thing of it is, 2 years ago you could have had something. But we've gone through this land use planning process. Everything's Ag 1. There's no zoning. It's all Ag 1.
David?
Yes, David Norton, 5434 North State Road 39, Scottsburg, Indiana, Gibson Township. I don't know if this is exactly what Rhonda's saying, but, or maybe this is just a way to address what she's saying and what he's saying, but I think what she's saying is it's easy to measure how big a barn is. It's hard to count how many chickens are in there today and Thursday and next month, and I think one thing she's trying to say is, how do you enforce a law which is about how many chickens are in an enclosed structure? That's going to be hard. That's hard for the neighbor to look at, you know, how many chickens are in there. They do know how big the building is. I think that'd be a more enforceable ordinance, is one thing she's saying. And then to address your problem, which is a very legitimate problem, is the size of the building doesn't address what kind of animals in it, how much manure. And just like you have a different number of animals you allow according to species, you could have a different size of building for species. So for dairy cows, you could allow a very large building. For turkeys, you know, maybe turkeys and chickens would have the same size building you would allow. Horses, feeder calves would be a different size building. Pigs would be different. You just have a different square footage building for each different species. And just like you have a special exemption for orphanages or retirement homes, you can say, you know, riding stables or other things have a, you know, some kind of a
concern, but I don't know that it's a realistic thing.
Yeah.
Basically, what we've got is the odors and the health issues, the issues that we regulate are reasonably and narrowly tailored to manure output. And the numbers, quantities for different species we've come up with are all equal across the board. 1 cow equals so many horses, equals so many fish and frogs, and I mean, we got animals in here, I can't imagine having seen those before. But, you know, I mean, it's basically a manure quantity output. Now, there may be variations in what's in the manure of different types of species of animals, but it's more reasonably calculated than is the state statute. And it's based on the best we can do as far as what's equal output per species of animal. And basically what we've done is we've applied it to lower numbers. And I can't imagine, and I could be wrong, but I can't imagine that a company or a grower continue to exist and operate economically, that it's feasible that they could just lower the numbers deliberately, especially after it's an existing building. I can't imagine. The buildings would have to be made smaller to go under that. I just can't imagine it would be economically feasible. And as far as Mr. Norton, I think really what you do is, it's a good, I don't think we can feasibly go in and count heads of livestock, but we can look at the reports that are issued from the company to the grower when there's a delivery, and we know what the numbers are then.
Yeah, there's not really any just independent growers out there that, you know, like if I just want to be a chicken farmer, I really couldn't go and build chicken houses, even if I had the money to do it, and get chickens and sell them and make anything. I mean, all of these houses are, you know, contracted with a grower, you know, Tyson or Farvest or Purdue. There's not really, you know, privateers in the poultry business out there just making these kind of things that, you know, there's no reports or, you know, anything to go along with them. I mean, you know, Tyson's building a house to, you know, handle the capacity of birds that they're wanting to run through the, you know, it's a standard size and a standard number of birds. And Farvest and Purdue are the same way as far as I know. So, I mean, it's not like there's individual people out here raising chickens and selling them on the open market, you know. So,
We do have some Tyson people, some Farvest people in Finland who are comfortable addressing this issue of whether it's, whether that's happening. Is that something that the company?
No, sir, we don't. We don't lower, I'm Trey Martin, Gordon, Indiana. We don't lower any of our placement numbers to fall below that minimum guideline set by the state as of right now.
Do you
And
have,
as far as if we had, you know, if we were to go and place one house farms here and there to try and stay under that, minimum guideline, then that's what will cost us more in yield. So we're not going to, I guess, stab ourselves in the back and place all these different farms here and there and yonder and have to make trips over here and over there just to try to circumvent the system.
No one-house farms over there.
Yeah.
are you under the 18,000 birds?
No.
No. Okay, so you have to have 18,000 in the house.
We're chickens, so.
Oh, well, chickens. How about turkeys? Turkeys are the big birds. How many per house? Is it under 18,000?
No.
No? Okay.
Not calculated or planned.
Okay.
You know, I've been through the permit process with IBM, and I guess they all go back into Burton with that. That's a pretty significant process as far as permitting process. And whenever you get your permit, it specifies the number of animals in those buildings that you're permitted for. And I think that so many acres available to be able to spread that manure in those facilities. So numbers do drive the system as of now. And currently, right now, there's a lot of things I would like to see in this thing, but as far as those numbers, I think we have to stand pretty firm and hard with actual population numbers of animal species as far as being the driving factor in this permit process. All right. Anything else from the Plan Commission? What's your direction? The hour and the time is getting long.
We still need to close the public hearing.
You already closed it.
Or it's
We're
already-
in
we just got into
We're in
discussion.
a Plan Commission.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn.
I do not agree.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's open for discussion.
I would like to vote on the ordinance.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we should close the meeting without doing nothing. Either we need to send it back around again, or we need to approve it and pass it on to the commission.
We do have a motion to adjourn. We're having discussion. We take a vote. If it doesn't pass, then we can go back into our business. So the motion, is there any more discussion on adjournment? If not, we'll take it to a vote. We'll do this by hand or,
By way of discussion, let me, if we don't take this to a vote, let's make sure that if you adjourn, that this could be taken up at a vote at another meeting.
Well, there's no motion on the table yet of what to do with this ordinance, so I think we can vote on it another time. That would be my understanding.
I just want to make sure that the statute doesn't require that it be addressed at the night of the hearing.
That's what I got you.
See what I'm saying?
yeah,
It's not a procedural issue, it's a statutory issue.
all right, review that. In the discussion, I really do not want to adjourn without some direction with this ordinance. You know, that's my preference. So,
I'll agree with that too. I'll withdraw.
you know, withdraw.
I will withdraw.
Got withdrawal?
Make it easy.
Okay. All right. Meat and potatoes here, boys and girls. I've got to be politically correct.
All right, I'll make a motion that would make a positive recommendation to the commissioners to adopt this ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion to make a positive, affirmative recommendation to send to the commissioners. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Jim Day, second. It's open for discussion. I will tell you that I will ask for a roll call vote in this. We'll go by individual members, and they will give a verbal vote.
Just pointing out to everybody that doesn't know, this is in no way what we're doing here tonight is passing the ordinance, and if the vote passes, we're simply passing it on to the commissioners, which are the governing body that we answer to as the planning commission.
As a procedural note, also let me point out to you, the statute has two requirements that, in our case, cannot both be met. The statute requires that the county executive, which is the commissioners, take this up at their next regularly scheduled meeting, which is tomorrow. It goes on to require that it be specifically mentioned in the open door law notice, which cannot feasibly happen between now and tomorrow because they can't, because of the 48-hour notice. So the commissioners, the next meeting at which we convene most statutes will be the second meeting of the month.
Jeff Souter,
Aye.
Philip Marshall,
You're asking to send it to the commissioners the way it stands right now, with the footages and the distance. Yeah, let's go ahead and give it to the commissioners, and let the commissioners decide.
so positive. Vote.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam DeFord. Aye. Irvin Day,
Aye.
Scott Mullin. Aye. Danielle Walker, Jim Day. Aye. Lane Freiberger,
Aye.
David Hoare. Nay. What's the total?
Vote is 8-1 with 0 abstentions. The last one was a nay. I have a certification of the ordinance to be attached to the ordinance to go to the Washington County Board of Commissioners. It says that the public hearing scheduled meeting of the Washington County Planning Commission on May 6, 2013, which meeting was held in accordance with 34-7-4-507 by a vote of 8-1 with 0 abstentions. The Washington County Planning Commission approved and adopted the attached version of the proposed Washington County zoning ordinance and hereby officially certifies said ordinance to you, the Board of Commissioners of Washington County, as a legislative body favorably recommending the ordinance to you for adoption. And it's for signature by
Yes. I entertain a motion to adjourn. If there's no other business. So moved. Adam DeFord made the motion, second.
I'll second.
Lane Freiberger, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.